Press 2 fingers flat against your stomach, just below your navel, right now. Not hard. Just rest them there. Do you feel that low, dull ache that never quite goes away? That subtle bloat that was not there 10 years ago? The one that arrives by mid-morning even when you have eaten nothing strange? The stomach that gurgles at you in quiet rooms, that reacts to foods it used to handle without complaint, that leaves you feeling vaguely wrong in a way no doctor has ever been able to name on paper? Most people over 55 have been told 3 things about that feeling. They have been told it is IBS, or acid reflux, or just aging. They have been handed a prescription for an acid blocker, told to avoid gluten, or told in the gentlest possible way that this is simply what the digestive system does as it gets older. Every single one of those explanations is missing the real cause. And none of those treatments addresses what is actually breaking down inside your gut right now, quietly, invisibly, in a way that affects not just your digestion, but your immune system, your mood, your joint pain, your sleep, and your mental clarity. The gut lining, 1 cell thick. A surface area the size of a studio apartment folded into a tube no wider than your fist. That lining is not just a passive pipe. It is a living, active, extraordinarily complex barrier that decides what enters your bloodstream and what gets blocked. When it is intact, it is one of the most powerful protective systems in your body. When it degrades, and after 55 it degrades faster than almost anyone has been told, the consequences reach every organ you have. There is one fermented food that has been used for over 4,000 years that costs less than $2 a week, that is sitting in a jar on a supermarket shelf right now, and that clinical research now shows can measurably begin rebuilding that lining in 7 days. Most people with a broken gut have never tried it. Not because it is hard to find, because nobody told them it was the answer. I am going to tell you today, here is what your doctor sees when you walk in with gut complaints. They see a symptom list. Bloating, irregular bowel movements, cramping, reflux, fatigue after eating. They run a standard panel. They check for celiac markers, H. pylori, maybe do a colonoscopy. Everything comes back in normal range. And then, because the test results do not explain your symptoms, they give the symptoms a label. EBS, functional dyspepsia, stress-related GI distress. The label is not a diagnosis. The label is a medical way of saying, we can see that something is wrong, but we cannot see where it comes from on any test we currently run routinely. What those tests are not checking, because there is no standard billing code for it and no pharmaceutical treatment waiting at the end of the conversation, is the physical integrity of your gut lining itself. The gut lining is made of a single continuous layer of cells called enterocytes. These cells are sealed together by protein structures called tight junctions. Think of them as the mortar between bricks. The bricks are the cells. The mortar is what holds the seal. When the tight junctions are intact, only very specific molecules can pass through the gut wall into the bloodstream. Digested nutrients, certain vitamins, water. Everything else, undigested food particles, bacteria, bacterial byproducts, toxins, stays inside the gut tube where it belongs. When the tight junctions degrade, those barriers open. Particles that were never meant to cross into the bloodstream begin crossing. Your immune system, which patrols the bloodstream, encounters these particles and does the only thing it knows how to do. It attacks them. That immune response does not stay in the gut. It circulates. It produces systemic inflammation, and that inflammation is now recognized in clinical research as a driver of conditions that seem to have nothing to do with digestion. Joint pain, brain fog, skin problems, low mood, fatigue that does not improve with rest, autoimmune flares. This is what researchers call intestinal hyperpermeability. The popular term is leaky gut. The medical establishment has been slow to embrace the term because it became associated with fringe wellness culture. But the underlying biology is not fringe. It is published across hundreds of peer-reviewed papers. The tight junctions are real. Their degradation is real. The systemic consequences are real and measurable. So what causes them to degrade? 4 things, and people over 55 almost universally experience all 4 simultaneously. First, age-related decline in mucin production. The gut lining is not just a layer of cells. It is coated in a thick layer of mucus produced by goblet cells embedded in the intestinal wall. This mucus layer is the first line of defense between the contents of your gut and the cells beneath it. It is where beneficial bacteria live and where harmful pathogens get trapped before they can reach the epithelial surface. After 50, goblet cell density and mucin production both decline. The mucus layer becomes thinner and more porous. The cells below it are now more exposed. The tight junctions, which were never designed to operate without adequate mucus protection above them, begin to degrade faster. Your gut contains approximately 38 trillion microorganisms. The balance of those organisms which strains dominate, which are present in small but critical numbers, which have been wiped out by antibiotics or dietary changes, directly determines the health of your gut lining. Certain bacteria, particularly strains of lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, produce short-chain fatty acids, especially one called butyrate, which is the primary fuel source for enterocytes. The cells of your gut lining run on butyrate the way your muscles run on glucose. Without sufficient butyrate-producing bacteria, the enterocytes become energy-starved, their renewal rate slows, and tight junctions weaken. A single course of broad-spectrum antibiotics can reduce gut bacterial diversity by up to 90% in some studies, with full recovery taking months to years in older adults. Most people over 55 have had several courses. Inflammation is not just a consequence of gut lining damage. It is also a cause. Systemic inflammatory signals directly loosen tight junction proteins. It is a feedback loop. Inflammation damages the gut lining. The damaged gut lining leaks bacterial products into the bloodstream. Those bacterial products trigger more inflammation, which damages the gut lining further. This loop runs quietly in the background in most older adults. It is the reason the condition progresses slowly enough that most people do not notice the degradation until it has been happening for years. After 60, stomach acid production often declines by 30 to 40%. This is called hypochlorhydria, and it creates a cascade of problems for the gut lining. Low acid means food is inadequately broken down before it reaches the small intestine. Partially digested food particles, particularly proteins, arrive at the gut lining in a form the tight junctions were never designed to manage. The undigested fragments trigger local immune responses and directly stress the junction proteins. Low acid also means that pathogens that should be killed in the stomach survive and reach the intestine, where they compete with beneficial bacteria and produce compounds that irritate the lining. This is the full picture that no single appointment has ever laid out for most people reading this. And every piece of it points toward the same corrective mechanism. I need you to stop here and take this seriously. Everything that follows is for people with chronic, low-grade gut symptoms. Persistent bloating, irregular digestion, sensitivity to foods that never bothered you, fatigue after meals, vague abdominal discomfort. Symptoms that have been present for months or years and have already been evaluated without a finding of serious pathology. There are symptoms that mean you stop this video and speak to a doctor today. Not this week. Today, blood in your stool or black tarry stools. These require same-day evaluation. Do not manage them at home. Severe abdominal pain that comes on suddenly, especially if it is localized to one area and accompanied by fever. This can indicate appendicitis, bowel obstruction, or intestinal perforation. Unintentional weight loss of more than 5 pounds over 1 to 2 months alongside digestive changes. This combination always requires investigation. Vomiting that is persistent, severe, or contains blood. A new onset of symptoms in someone over 50 who has not had a colonoscopy in the last 10 years. Please get screened first. The protocol in this video is not a substitute for cancer screening. If none of those apply to you and your gut symptoms are the chronic, grinding, never quite resolved kind, then what I am about to walk you through is precisely for you. The fermented food I am going to describe is not a supplement. It is not something you order online. It is not a new product invented by a wellness brand. It is kefir. Specifically, traditional milk kefir, made with live kefir grains. Not the flavored, sweetened commercial varieties with a kefir label and a fraction of the live culture density. Traditional plain full-fat milk kefir. Kefir has been consumed continuously for over 4,000 years in the Caucasus Mountains, in Central Asia, and across Eastern Europe. The name comes from the Turkish word meaning good feeling. It was used medicinally long before anyone understood microbiology because people observed across generations that it settled the stomach, restored strength after illness, and improved digestion in people who could tolerate almost nothing else. Modern research has now explained exactly why. Kefir is not yogurt. This distinction is crucial, and it is the reason most people who have tried yogurt for their gut and found it marginally helpful have never experienced the full effect. Yogurt is made using 2 to 4 bacterial strains, primarily Lactobacillus bulgaricus and Streptococcus thermophilus. These strains survive digestion in modest numbers and have modest benefits. Kefir is made using kefir grains, which are complex symbiotic communities of 30 to 50 different species of bacteria and yeasts bound together in a polysaccharide matrix. The diversity is the key. It is not 1 or 2 strains of bacteria. It is a functioning ecosystem. A single cup of traditional kefir contains between 1 and 10 trillion colony-forming units of live microorganisms. For context, a high-quality commercial probiotic supplement typically contains 1 to 10 billion. Kefir delivers up to 1,000 times more live cultures per serving than most supplements, in a food matrix that dramatically increases their survival through the acid environment of the stomach. But the bacteria count is not even the main story. Mechanism 1, kefirin directly strengthens tight junctions. Kefirin is a polysaccharide, a complex carbohydrate produced exclusively by Lactobacillus kefiranofaciens, one of the dominant organisms in kefir grains. It is found in no other food at meaningful concentrations. Research published in the Journal of Dairy Science and replicated in multiple subsequent studies has demonstrated that kefirin directly interacts with the proteins that form tight junctions, specifically agglutinin and claudin, 2 of the structural proteins that create the seal between enterocytes. Kefirin upregulates the expression of these proteins, meaning it tells the cells to produce more of the sealing material, and it stabilizes the junctions already in place. This is not an indirect effect through the microbiome. It is a direct action of a specific compound in kefir on the physical structure of your gut lining. This is why the effect is measurable within 7 days. The tight junctions begin responding to kefirin exposure within the first week of consistent consumption. Mechanism 2. Kefir dramatically increases butyrate production. The bacteria in kefir, once established in the gut environment, ferment prebiotic fibers, the indigestible carbohydrates in plant foods, into short-chain fatty acids. The primary product of this fermentation, when Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium strains are dominant, is butyrate. Butyrate is the fuel that keeps your enterocytes alive and replicating properly. Enterocytes have one of the fastest turnover rates of any cell in the body. The entire gut lining replaces itself completely every 3 to 5 days under healthy conditions. That renewal requires massive energy input, and butyrate provides the majority of it. When butyrate production is low, enterocyte turnover slows. Old damaged cells stay in place longer. Tight junctions that should be renewed are held together by fatigued proteins. The lining becomes progressively less functional. Adding kefir to the gut environment restores the bacterial populations that produce butyrate. Clinical studies have shown measurable increases in fecal butyrate concentrations within 14 days of regular kefir consumption, with some studies showing initial shifts within 7 days. Mechanism 3. Kefir suppresses the inflammatory signals that loosen tight junctions. Several cytokines, signaling proteins produced by the immune system during inflammation, are known to directly attack tight junction proteins. Tumor necrosis factor alpha and interleukin-1 beta, 2 of the most studied pro-inflammatory cytokines, physically loosen the claudin and agglutinin bonds that hold enterocytes together. Multiple clinical studies, including a 2021 Stanford randomized controlled trial published in the journal Cell, have demonstrated that regular fermented food consumption, with kefir showing the strongest effect among foods tested, significantly reduces circulating levels of inflammatory cytokines. The Stanford trial showed a reduction in 19 inflammatory proteins after 10 weeks of high fermented food intake. Lower inflammation means less chemical attack on tight junctions. The same seal that was being dissolved from outside is now being protected from outside, while kefirin rebuilds it from within. Mechanism 4. Kefir restores mucin-producing goblet cells. This is the mechanism that connects kefir to the mucus layer we discussed earlier. Research from multiple gastroenterology departments has demonstrated that certain lactobacillus strains in kefir, particularly L. rhamnosus and L. reuteri, stimulate goblet cell activity and increase mucin expression. In practical terms, the mucus layer that protects the enterocytes beneath it begins to thicken. The bacteria that should live in that mucus layer and perform their protective functions find a more hospitable environment. And the enterocytes themselves, now shielded by a more adequate mucus coat, are under less physical stress. This is a regenerative feedback effect. A thicker mucus layer protects the cells that produce the tight junctions. More protected cells produce stronger tight junctions. Stronger, tight junctions reduce the bacterial translocation that was driving inflammation. Lower inflammation reduces goblet cell suppression. Goblet cells recover and produce more mucin. The loop reverses. Mechanism 5, kefir improves stomach acid sufficiency and enzyme activity. This fifth mechanism is the least discussed and arguably the most important for people over 60. The organic acids produced during kefir fermentation, primarily lactic acid and acetic acid, create a food matrix with a naturally low pH, around 3.5 to 4.5. When consumed, particularly in the morning on a relatively empty stomach, this acid load provides a priming effect on gastric acid secretion. It signals the stomach to produce hydrochloric acid more efficiently for the meals that follow. Additionally, kefir contains a range of native digestive enzymes, including lactase, protease, and lipase, produced by the microorganisms during fermentation. These enzymes assist in the breakdown of proteins and fats in subsequent meals, reducing the burden on an already insufficient digestive system and dramatically reducing the arrival of partially digested food particles at the gut lining. The combination of improved acid priming and native enzyme supplementation means that by the time food reaches the small intestine, it is more completely digested, and the tight junctions face less immunological provocation from undigested particles. I want to tell you about someone I will call Helen. Helen was 63 years old when she first came in. Retired pharmacist, which she mentioned immediately as if to preempt the conversation. She had spent 2 decades dispensing acid blockers, and she knew exactly what she had been prescribed and exactly what it was not fixing. Her story went like this. For 5 years, she had been living with what her GP called functional IBS. Bloating that began within an hour of eating almost anything. A fatigue after meals that she described as being anesthetized. Joint stiffness in the mornings that 3 rheumatologists had been unable to explain. And a brain fog that she said had crept in so gradually she had almost accepted it as normal aging before her husband pointed out that she had always been sharp and was no longer quite herself. Her colonoscopy was clean. Her celiac panel was negative. Her inflammatory markers, CRP and ESR, were mildly elevated, but within a range no one had felt justified acting on. She had eliminated gluten. She had eliminated dairy. She had spent $400 on a probiotic supplement. None of it had moved the needle. When Helen sat down and listed what she ate in a typical week, the absence was striking. Almost no fermented food of any kind. She had eliminated dairy 2 years earlier on the advice of a nutritionist who believed it was driving her inflammation. She ate a clean, careful, largely plant-based diet. No fermented vegetables. No kefir. No traditional soured foods of any kind. Her gut was being asked to maintain a complex living ecosystem with almost no microbial input from her diet. I asked her to try one thing only. Plain full-fat kefir, 1 cup per day, first thing in the morning for 4 weeks. Nothing else changed. I asked her to keep a simple daily note. Energy, bloating, joint stiffness, mental clarity. 1 to 10 each morning. Week 1, the bloating was slightly worse for the first 3 days. She called me understandably concerned. I explained that this is a documented adjustment response. A temporary increase in gas production as the microbial ecosystem in the gut shifts. I told her to reduce to half a cup for a few days and build back up. She did. By day 7, the bloating was measurably better. Not gone. Better. Her rating dropped from a consistent 7 out of 10 to a 4. By the end of week 2, she was sleeping through the night for the first time in years. She had not mentioned sleep as one of her complaints because she had not connected it to her gut. The gut-brain axis, the direct bidirectional communication between the enteric nervous system in your gut and the central nervous system in your brain, means that gut inflammation disrupts sleep architecture in ways that have nothing to do with stress or anxiety. By week 4, her post-meal fatigue was largely gone. Her joint stiffness in the morning had reduced by what she described as 60%. She had not changed her diet in any other way. At the 8-week mark, we ran her inflammatory markers again. Her CRP had dropped from 4.2 to 1.8. Still slightly elevated, but the direction of travel was unambiguous. Helen did not stop taking kefir. The last time I spoke with her, she had been taking it for 14 months. She was making it herself at home. The jar on her kitchen counter, she said, was the best $2 a week she had ever spent. Here's exactly what to do, day by day, for the first week. Before you begin, know your starting point. Spend 3 minutes right now. Write down 4 numbers on a scale of 1 to 10. Your typical bloating level by afternoon. your energy level 2 hours after your main meal, your mental clarity in the late morning, your sleep quality, specifically how rested you feel when you wake. These four numbers are your baseline. You will rescore them on day 7. The change is the evidence. Do not rely on memory. Day 1 and 2, begin with half a cup of plain full-fat kefir, 120 milliliters, 30 minutes before breakfast. Nothing with it, just kefir, room temperature, not cold, straight from the refrigerator. Cold kefir slows gastric motility and reduces the acid priming effect. Alongside this, add 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed to your breakfast. Flaxseed provides soluble fiber that the bacteria introduced by kefir will ferment into butyrate. You are feeding the incoming bacteria on the same day you introduce them. Do not make any other dietary changes on days 1 and 2. You want to be able to clearly read any adjustment response without confounding variables. Day 3 and 4. If no significant discomfort on days 1 and 2, increase to a full cup of kefir, 240 milliliters, still 30 minutes before breakfast. If you experience notable bloating or gas on days 1 and 2, stay at half a cup and give it 2 more days before increasing. On day 3, add 1 additional food, raw sauerkraut, 2 tablespoons with lunch, not pasteurized sauerkraut from a shelf-stable jar, refrigerated raw unpasteurized sauerkraut from the refrigerated section of the supermarket. Look at the ingredients: cabbage, salt, and nothing else. Sauerkraut provides a different set of bacterial strains than kefir, primarily Leuconostoc and Lactobacillus plantarum, and it provides a significant prebiotic fiber load in the form of pectin and cellulose from the cabbage. It works synergistically with kefir. The kefir populations begin establishing in the small intestine, while the sauerkraut populations colonize the large intestine, and both contribute to butyrate production. Day 5 and 6. Maintain 1 cup of kefir before breakfast and 2 tablespoons of sauerkraut at lunch. Add 1 new element, a small serving of cooked and cooled potatoes, approximately half a cup with dinner. Potatoes that have been cooked and then refrigerated overnight develop a type of starch called resistant starch, which passes through the small intestine undigested and is fermented by bacteria in the large intestine. Resistant starch is one of the most potent drivers of butyrate production in the human gut. It is also one of the most underused. A cold potato from last night's dinner. Half a cup. It does not need to be reheated. In fact, reheating it converts the resistant starch back to regular starch, removing most of the benefit. Eat it cold or at room temperature. On day 5, also eliminate for these 7 days the 2 things most likely to be actively damaging your gut lining at the same time you are trying to repair it. Ultra-processed foods, anything with an ingredient list longer than 5 items that includes emulsifiers, artificial sweeteners, or modified starches. Emulsifiers, particularly polysorbate 80 and carboxymethyl cellulose, are documented disruptors of the gut mucus layer. They are in almost every commercial baked good, processed sauce, flavored yogurt, and packaged snack food. Alcohol, even a single drink per day during this 7-day window. Alcohol directly increases intestinal permeability. It loosens tight junctions within hours of consumption. You cannot meaningfully rebuild the gut lining during the day and then loosen it again each evening. 7 days. Not permanent, but 7 days without these 2 things will allow you to see clearly what the fermented food is actually doing. Day 7. Maintain the full protocol: kefir before breakfast, sauerkraut at lunch, resistant starch at dinner, and rescore your 4 numbers. Bloating by afternoon. Energy 2 hours post-meal. Mental clarity in the late morning. Sleep quality on waking. For most people, at least 2 of the 4 numbers will have moved. The most common improvements in the first week are the afternoon bloating and the post-meal energy, because these are most directly tied to tight junction function and the reduction in undigested particle load arriving at the lining. Mental clarity tends to follow in weeks 2 and 3 as the gut-brain axis normalizes. Sleep often improves between days 10 and 20 as systemic inflammation begins to measurably fall. The 7-day protocol starts the process. These additions accelerate and deepen it. Bone broth, 2 cups per day in week 2. Bone broth contains gelatin, glycine, and proline, all precursors to the collagen that forms the structural scaffold beneath the gut lining. Collagen production in the gut wall slows with age just as it does in skin. Providing the raw amino acid building blocks of collagen directly supports the structural renewal of the lining beneath the tight junctions. Make your own if you can, 4 hours on the stove minimum, from chicken feet or beef knuckle bones, which have the highest gelatin content of any cut. Commercial bone broth in cartons is a reasonable substitute. Aim for at least 5 grams of protein per cup, which indicates sufficient gelatin content. L-glutamine 5 grams per morning in week 2. Glutamine is the primary fuel source for rapidly dividing cells, including enterocytes. When the gut lining is damaged and turnover is accelerated, demand for glutamine in the intestinal tissue outpaces what diet alone provides. Research across multiple gastroenterology centers has shown that glutamine supplementation at 5 grams per day measurably accelerates gut lining repair in people with intestinal hyperpermeability. Dissolve it in the kefir if you like. It is tasteless and does not interfere with the fermentation. This is not a drug. It is an amino acid found in eggs, fish, and red meat, and you are simply ensuring an adequate supply during a period of active repair. Zinc carnosine, 1 serving per day in week 3. This specific form of zinc, a chelated combination of zinc and the amino acid carnosine, has a particular affinity for intestinal tissue. Multiple Japanese clinical trials, where it was originally developed as a treatment for gastric ulcers, have demonstrated that zinc carnosine adheres to damaged areas of the gut lining and specifically promotes the healing of the mucosal surface. It also inhibits the activity of enzymes that break down tight junction proteins. It is available as a supplement. The dosage used in clinical research is typically 75 milligrams per day. Take it with the evening meal after the day's largest food intake, when the gut lining is most actively in repair mode. 5 things you can do starting tonight. 1. Go to the supermarket tomorrow morning or tonight if you can. Find plain, full-fat kefir with nothing in it but milk and cultures. If you cannot find it, search for kefir grains online. They cost less than $8 and they will last you indefinitely. 2. While you are there, find raw refrigerated sauerkraut. It will be in the refrigerated section, not on a shelf. The jar should feel cool. The ingredient list should say cabbage and salt. 2 tablespoons tomorrow at lunch. 3. Cook potatoes tonight. Not a large quantity. A few medium potatoes, boiled or baked. Let them cool completely and put them in the refrigerator. Tomorrow evening, half a cup with dinner. That is your resistant starch. 4. Score yourself right now. Write down the 4 numbers. Bloating, post-meal energy, morning mental clarity, sleep quality. 1 to 10 each. Put the date next to them. Do not rely on your memory to evaluate what changes in 7 days. Write it now. 5. Remove 1 ultra-processed food from your routine for the next 7 days. Just 1. Pick the one you consume most consistently. A Crackers brand. A flavored yogurt. A packet sauce. Read the ingredient list. If there are more than 5 items and you cannot pronounce 2 of them, that product is actively working against what you are trying to build. Your gut lining replaces itself completely every 3 to 5 days. That is not a metaphor for slow, gradual change. That is literal cell turnover. The lining you have today is not the lining you will have by the end of next week. The question is not whether the lining will be replaced. The question is whether the conditions for replacement are good enough to produce a better lining than the one being shed, or whether the same compromised environment will simply produce more of the same damaged architecture. Kefir changes the conditions. Sauerkraut changes the conditions. Resistant starch changes the conditions. Reduced inflammatory input changes the conditions. Each of these is a message to the renewal process that says, this time, build it stronger. The gut lining that replaces itself next week will be doing so in a changed environment. With more butyrate available, with kefir reinforcing the tight junction proteins, with lower inflammatory cytokine levels attacking from outside, with a more adequate mucus layer as the first line of defense. The symptoms that have been accumulating for years did not arrive overnight. The repair will not be complete in 7 days, but the direction of travel can reverse in 7 days, and a change in direction, sustained consistently, changes everything. Helen noticed it in 7 days. Her inflammation markers confirmed it in 8 weeks. 14 months later, the jar is still on her counter. Your jar can be on yours. You may be giving them the explanation that finally makes sense of everything they have been experiencing. A 4,000-year-old food. 1 cup, 30 minutes before breakfast. 7 days. The gut lining is waiting to be given what it needs to rebuild. Give it the chance.